Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sid, and in today's video, I am going to be talking about the captive orca, originally named Snorky. He was captured on April 26th, 1968 from Pender Harbour in British Columbia at around 6 years old. He was also captured with several other orcas. They were held in floating net pens while they waited for buyers to come from all over the world to check them out. Some of the orcas even died waiting, spending many weeks in these tiny pens. 7 of them ended up being purchased by aquariums and theme parks. After 13 days, a buyer from the oceanarium Marineland of the Pacific arrived wanting to purchase 2 orcas. They selected a male they named Snorky and a female they named Corky. They were then loaded onto a cargo plane and after a 12-hour flight arrived in Los Angeles, California, where the park was located. There was already an orca at Marineland named Orky. According to a 1967 Kingsport newspaper article, Orky was allegedly accidentally caught in a fishing net in Canada. And it seems like Orky was kind of mad that he then got transported to Marineland, because curator at the time, John Prescott, told the newspaper, "Orky is quite a handful. Even now. I'm always afraid of him when I'm in his tank. Once I was swimming around him and he started pushing. Believe me, I got out of there fast. He is so huge, you could be seriously hurt if he just hit you by accident." When Snorky and Corky arrived, Orky was kept separate from them in adjacent pools, but they would still vocalize with each other. While Orky remained separated, Corky and Snorky ended up becoming the main attractions to the park. They were in newspaper articles, trained to do tricks, featured on promotional material, and Snorky was even on a postcard that was sold at the park's gift shop. A year after arriving in mid-1969, Orky became sick, and soon Snorky and Corky weren't able to vocalize with him at all because he died of pneumonia. Even though Snorky was very well known to the public, his identity was completely erased, and he was then renamed to Orky. So the original Orky died, and then Snorky was renamed to Orky. 6 months later, 3 freshly captured orca arrived at the park. Kenny, Patches, and another orca they named Corky. So there was then another orca named Corky II, and they all came from the same pod Marineland previously purchased their orcas from. Not long after they arrived, Corky I died from a mediastinal abscess, then Patches and Kenny died as well. So then it was just Orky II and Corky II. Together they became the star attractions to the park. Their ability to perform in the water endeared many visitors to them. They were trained in a specific way with hand motions, vocal commands, and eye contact. The trainers found them very easy to train.
I'd have to say they're very easy to train. Probably the easiest of all the animals I've worked with here at the park because they're so intelligent. We've left behaviors out for a year, and we've given them command, and they've remembered the behavior.
But even when they weren't receiving hand signals, they were still very receptive to people. A man named Dave Mulligan and his friends broke into Marineland when they were drunk. He wrote about the saga in his memoir, Mulligan's Wake, and he said he and his friend got in the pool with Corky and Orky, and they rode on their backs. He said, "They were like 2 giant puppies. Sometimes I would be floating and would see a big white patch go under me and I would think, wow, that's a killer whale." But as happy as the orca may have seemed, there were still concerns about their well-being.
One can't help get the feeling if they mind being cooped up. I mean, just confined to just one general area.
That's a hard question to answer. It really is. I look at it in the way that being as intelligent as they are, it's my responsibility and the people's responsibility that we're here with them to give them the stimulation both mentally and physically, give them everything that they are missing from being in the wild. To me, that makes it okay.
Even with everything the trainers did for them, Orky was still not happy. He made that known by the way he almost killed multiple trainers. But before I pull you deeper into the story, I want to thank today's sponsor, Hungry Minds. If you're anything like me and you love falling down rabbit holes, then I think you will genuinely appreciate this book. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding a Civilization, and it's basically a beautifully illustrated encyclopedia covering some of humanity's greatest inventions and discoveries. The illustrations are what stood out to me the most. They're done in a style that mixes old medieval artwork with detailed engineering drawings. So it's the kind of book you can leave on a coffee table that people will actually pick up and start flicking through. It covers everything from ancient engineering and scientific discoveries across more than 400 pages, and there's even a hidden puzzle woven throughout the book if you like solving mysteries. It actually became one of the biggest crowdfunding book projects ever, raising over $2.3 million and going on to becoming a bestseller. So if you're looking for a unique gift or just want another rabbit hole to disappear into, you can check it out using my link at the top of the description box. You'll also get 10% off using my code SidDwyer10. Thanks again to Hungry Minds for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into the story. So even though trainers and sometimes members of the public would get into the water with Orky, they probably shouldn't have been. Corky loved attention and interaction with people, but Orky not so much. When he was unhappy, his eyes would turn red. Trainer Tim Desmond talked about his experiences training Orky and Corky in a 1982 edition of Animal Kingdom magazine. During one performance, Orky performed what was considered poorly, and Tim withheld food, and understandably that pissed Orky off. Tim said his left eye opened wide, showing its bloodshot white. The red eye, as we call it, signals anger. So Tim gave him a reward anyway. In Eugene Linden's book, The Parrot's Lament, trainer Gail Lawley recounted some intense moments with Orky. She said the first stage to his anger was his eyes turning red, and in one instance where his anger wasn't quelled, he erupted from the water, grabbed the offending trainer in his mouth, and then let go. A man named Larry Clark, who was a head trainer at Marineland, also had a red-eyed encounter with Orky. He spoke about it in the LA's own Marineland podcast.
And he didn't want to come over to the side of the pool, and then he finally came over and I got on him, and instead of, normally he would do 2 laps around the circumference of the pool, he went down and then came right up the middle of the pool, and you can see their eyes when their eyes get just open up really big, and all you can see is red. Mm-hmm. You know that you're in deep kimchi. One of the other trainers was there and saw that I was in trouble, so I jumped off towards the wall, and he grabbed me by the back of my wetsuit, the collar and my butt, and threw me over the wall.
Wow.
And Orky went down and came up snapping. I told the curator, Dave Brown, at that time, I said, I'm not doing this shit no more.
Veterinarian Dr. Samuel Vanissi shared an anecdote in the Chicago Tribunal about a time he was treating Orky's eye because it had been exposed to too much sunlight. Dr. Samuel found it difficult to work on him because every time he would inch closer, a trainer would tell Orky to get back. The trainer told him they were being cautious because 2 weeks earlier, Orky had dragged his former trainer underwater for 12 minutes. Another trainer he held underwater was Jill Stratton on May 2nd, 1978. At that time, the park had been closed for months for renovations. The only visitors that were allowed in were groups of school children, and on that day, a group of high schoolers were visiting. With the students watching, Jill jumped into the pool with Orky. She sat on top of him him, rode him around for a few minutes, and then he kicked her off. She told the LA Times that he first dunked her in the water a couple of times. She was able to catch her breath between dunks, but then he pushed her to the bottom of the pool. She said he was very gentle in the way he did it, and she said, "I could feel the bottom below me, and I could feel him above me. I was hoping I could hold my breath, but I wasn't frightened. I just thought I'd relax and let him do what he wanted. 5 minutes is nothing to him. He can hold his breath for half an hour." While being underwater for 4 minutes, she lost consciousness. Another trainer, Tom Otten, who was also Jill's fiance, dove into the pool with Orky. His commotion in the water prompted Orky to release Jill, and she floated to the surface. Tom grabbed Jill's body and was struggling to get her out of the water, but Orky rose up beneath them and provided his body as a platform for them to get out of the water. On dry land, she was no longer breathing and her heart stopped beating, but the students who had been watching the whole ordeal sprang into action. They had actually just done a resuscitation course, so 3 high schoolers were able to revive Jill, and she was incredibly forgiving towards Orky. She believed he was just playing and didn't realize the damage he was doing. She told the LA Times, "He didn't hurt me, and it's awfully hard for 14,000 pounds of killer whale to control himself that well. I guess he just overestimated how long I could hold my breath. He was probably just as surprised as anyone that I couldn't hold my breath." Orky's punishment for what happened to Jill was solitary isolation for 3 days. The trainer, Tim Desmond, also put an end to getting into the water with the orcas. In a written interview with the PBS, he said, "After that, we didn't regularly do water work with him because we didn't feel safe. Without people going into the water with them, they must have felt safe enough to start making a family. But unfortunately, that didn't go well." Trainer Gail Lawley said that during one of Corky's pregnancies, Orky would swim up beside her and put his forehead against her belly. He was presumably using his acoustic imaging abilities to give Corky a sonogram. Whatever he saw, he didn't like because he slammed his head against the side of the pool. 2 hours later, Corky aborted her baby. That was one of Corky's 7 pregnancies. All of her babies died not long after birth, were stillborn, or aborted, but trainers did attempt to keep the babies alive for as long as they could. Alexandra Morton worked at Marineland after working for dolphin scientist John Lilly, and she later wrote a book about her experiences with Orky and Corky titled "Listening to Whales: What the Orcas Have Taught Us." She wrote how trainers attempted to force feed one of their babies in the pool, and Orky provided his head as a platform for the trainers to stand on while Corky floated next to them. One time, staff completely removed a baby from the pool to tend to them. That time they lifted the baby out of the pool with a crane and stretcher, then fed them, and then tried to return them to the water. But the crane operator misjudged his positioning and wasn't able to do that. So the stretcher with the baby in it was dangling in the air a few feet above the water. There were trainers in the pool waiting to receive the baby, but they could not reach up that far. Then the baby started to vomit up the food they had just been force-fed, and it was coming out of their blowhole and their mouth. Trainer Tim Desmond called it a desperate situation because it could cause the baby to aspirate. Then Corky came to the rescue. He idled underneath the dangling stretcher and allowed a trainer to stand atop him to untie it and free the baby. By that point in time, Marineland's rival, SeaWorld San Diego, which was around 100 miles away, was starting to expand their population of orcas. While Marineland was the first place for their orca to to give birth, SeaWorld was the first place for their orca to give birth and for the child to survive. And that child was incredibly valuable to them because Orca had become their entire brand. The popularity of their orca shows allowed them to open a second location in Ohio, and they were planning to open a third location in Orlando, Florida. And they needed more orcas to fill the new parks. But the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972 made it illegal to hunt or harass marine mammals in the US, so SeaWorld couldn't as easily remove more orcas from the wild to fill their parks. But it could actually be done with a permit for research and education purposes. While nowadays SeaWorld claims to be all about conservation and education, at the time they were strictly just a theme park and had no good reason to remove orcas from the wild. But SeaWorld begged to differ. The National Marine Fisheries Service could issue economic hardship exemptions for the capture of orca, and SeaWorld claimed their investment in their Orlando location would be threatened if they couldn't get their hands on more orca. So they were issued a permit to capture more orca in 1976. With the use of sailboats, explosives, and helicopters, 6 orca were herded into Budd Inlet in Puget Sound, Washington. It was done in complete view of the public, which prompted outrage and protests. Governor Dan Evans even sued SeaWorld over it. The orca were being held in a floating net structure, but before SeaWorld got the chance to take them out, their permit was revoked. The Seattle District Court ordered SeaWorld to give up its permit-granted right to collect killer whales in Washington. All 6 orca were released back into the wild. 7 years later, SeaWorld once again sought out a permit to capture more wild orcas. That time it was for alleged research and education purposes. They wanted to capture 100 orcas in Alaska, but only keep 10 for themselves. Then they would research and study the remaining 90 while they held them in their nets, and then they would later release them back into the wild. For some reason, the National Marine Fisheries Service liked the sound of that and issued SeaWorld a 5-year permit in November 1983, but no one else liked the sound of that. Before getting the chance to conduct the capture, there was immense public outcry. Greenpeace sued the National Marine Fisheries Service for issuing the permit without preparing an environmental impact study, and that lawsuit was successful. In January 1985, a federal judge declared that the permit was void, banning SeaWorld from capturing the orcas. The next year, SeaWorld's permit pressures were alleviated because one of their wild-caught males named Winston came of breeding age. He was captured in 1970 in Penn Cove, Washington State, by Don Goldberry, who was hired by SeaWorld. And during that capture, many other orcas died.
At that particular time, we had other animals in the net. We were busy. I was sorry that we did kill the animals, but there was nothing I could do. They were already dead. And I had to be concerned about the live animals. So we split open their stomachs, put anchors on them, and sunk them, because no one else would take them. And that's what happened. I did not advertise the fact that I lost them. I don't like to lose them, but I did lose them. And no one would take them. So I wasn't going out and put up a big billboard. I killed X amount of animals. I did it, and that was it. It was just that simple.
And Winston, one of the capture survivors, started to breed as soon as he was given the chance. He fathered a daughter named Kalina, born on September 26, 1985. But while Kalina was surviving for the time being, Winston's health was going downhill. A year prior, he got into an altercation with one of the females in his tank, and his flopped over dorsal fin got crushed. Veterinarians had to remove 2.5 foot off his 4.5 foot dorsal fin. Dolphin advocate Rick O'Barry spoke to a SeaWorld trainer who watched Winston's decline. They wished to remain anonymous, but they said, "I watched poor old Winston decline. By about 1986, Winston, post-operative, was kept in the back tank at the then new killer whale facility at the east side of the San Diego park. Not long after, Winston died in April 1986. So for SeaWorld's future, they desperately needed more orcas, preferably ones that could provide them with babies. The only place in the world that could provide them with breeding orcas was Marineland of the Pacific, and they wanted Orky and Corky. Harcourt Brace Joanovich is one of the world's biggest publishers, and at the time this was all happening, they owned SeaWorld. So they approached Marineland to negotiate. According to Marineland General Manager John Corcoran, in an LA Times article, SeaWorld's zoological director, Dr. Lanny H. Cornell, offered to buy Orky and Corky for $1 to $2 million. The offers were rejected, so Harcourt escalated things. They went above Marineland management and contacted the conglomerate in Hong Kong who owned Marineland at the time. After just a week of negotiations, Harcourt didn't just buy Orky and Corky, they bought the entirety of Marineland. They paid $23.4 million on December 31st, 1986. According to excerpts from the LA Times, Harcourt told staff they had no intentions of closing the park and that all staff would stay the same. They also said the killer whales would remain at Marineland. One staff member said, "I felt real good about it. You're always a little nervous about a new owner, but they let us know in no uncertain terms that they had no intention of changing anything." But then things did start to change. On January 20th, 1987, trucks and cranes descended on Marineland in the dead of night. They were there to take Orky and Corky to SeaWorld San Diego. They were lifted onto transport trucks that stressed them out immensely. According to trainers in the LA's own Marineland podcast, Orky made it the most known vocally that he was not happy.
But that particular event, I'd say, was extremely stressful for the animals. That night, I heard vocalizations from Orky I'd never heard before. It was really a bizarre scene.
I heard the stress calls were gut-wrenching, that they were just horrific.
At 2:30 a.m., Orky and Corky arrived at SeaWorld San Diego. Even though the orcas were being moved at night, people still saw and notified the media. And later that day, news broke of what SeaWorld did. Harcourt had no choice but to publicly announce their change of heart with the orcas. They said they moved the whales because they were in danger by being held in a tank that was too small. Harcourt's senior vice president, Bruce Starling, later admitted that they just wanted Marineland's orcas because their efforts to obtain federal approval to capture more whales had been blocked. Harcourt started to receive bomb threats, so they closed the gates to Marineland. They also said they were being notified of the public's anger by mail. They said, "We aren't used to getting nasty letters. We don't run acid pits. It's been a shock to everybody." It wasn't just the public who were angered, Marineland staff were too. They made signs that said, "Missing 2 killer whales. Stolen by SeaWorld." Employees also spoke to newspapers. One said, "They've totally lied to us the whole time." 22 days later, Harcourt permanently closed Marineland and fired all 300 employees.
This evening at Marineland, new owner Harcourt Brace Joanovich was busy getting more animals ready to be shipped out. They are keeping cameras away and doing their best to avoid publicity. Tonight at the local city council meeting, they couldn't. The man standing against the wall has to be the most unpopular person on all of the peninsula. He is Jim Harris, an HBJ vice president, who came to the hearing to explain his position.
We knew it would be a difficult thing for the community to go through, but basically it is closed. It's going to remain closed, and we're sorry if we've hurt any feelings over that.
This is a great big corporation with a lot of power, but what they're doing is a wrong thing. I mean, it's just a wrong thing.
It is closed. It will remain closed. We anticipate that within the next few weeks, all of the animals will be transferred out. And again, we are prepared, if necessary, to remove all of the buildings there and seed the site with grass and mow it.
In the eyes of SeaWorld, the whole saga was well worth it. They got their 2 proven breeders, and on top of that, Corky was pregnant at the time. At SeaWorld, Corky and Orky were kept separate from the other 3 orcas there. There was Kandu 5, Nootka, and Kanau. Kandu and Kanau were dominant Icelandic orcas. Nootka was a more chill orca captured in British Columbia, and because of that, she was the first to be introduced to Orky and Corky. They got along, and Nootka was rotated in and out of the 2 pairs. Eventually, they were just all introduced to each other. In a 2010 Reddit AMA with an anonymous but confirmed SeaWorld orca trainer, they talked about how this introduction went. They said that the water churned and churned for what seemed like hours. Lots of fast, hard swimming and breathing, lots of mixing and mingling, but little or no obvious aggression. While the initial introductions seemingly went okay, it completely disrupted the social dynamics and unsettled everyone. In March 1986, Kandu attacked trainer Jonathan Smith. The attack lasted 2.5 minutes, and he was taken to the hospital with broken ribs, a ruptured kidney, and a lacerated liver. A couple of months later, she turned on another trainer, Joanne Weber. It was during a practice session that Kandu leapt into the air, landed on Joanne, and thrust her to the bottom of the pool. She had a fractured neck, contusions to the skull and scalp, bruises to the left arm and shoulder, and she lost 50% of her side-to-side motion in her neck. Both Jonathan and Joanne sued SeaWorld. Jonathan's lawsuit said that SeaWorld officials concealed the dangerous propensities of killer whales and assured him it was safe for him to participate in the dramatic shows, though he had no formal training, and that they negligently and carelessly owned, maintained, trained, inspected, controlled, supervised, located, transported, and placed said killer whales. And he thought he was going to die. Joanne's lawsuit said SeaWorld induced her into the water by telling her that the orca were safe and gentle, and that management delayed medical treatment, insisting that her wetsuit be removed at the park so that it would not be damaged by medical personnel who would try to remove it at the hospital. Both their lawsuits were settled outside of court, and a gag order was placed on them. Throughout all of this, Corky aborted the baby she was pregnant with, and the fetus was found at the bottom of a holding tank. After that, she never ovulated again, and therefore could never get pregnant again. But Orky did manage to get Kandu and Kanau pregnant. Orky's biggest issue at SeaWorld was that the training methods used were different to the ones used at Marineland. Corky adapted well, but Orky did not. Orky's training issues came to a head on November 21st, 1987. Trainer John Sillick was working with Orky and Corky during a performance, and he was riding on the back of Corky when Orky leapt into the air and landed on him. Getting crushed between 2 whales left him with a broken pelvis, a broken femur, and broken ribs. It left him in a wheelchair.
What kept his body together is that, his wetsuit basically held him together, but I know he's had multiple surgeries and he's got tons of hardware in his body, and it's hard for me to believe that I didn't actually see that video while I was actually an animal trainer.
A spokeswoman for SeaWorld told the LA Times that it was a timing issue, not an act of aggression. Another employee said there was sexual activity behind the scenes with the orca, and that may have played a role. They said it was like riding a mare in season in the presence of a stallion, but ultimately no one knows what really happened. But what everyone did know was that it was particularly unusual that so many issues were taking place at the same time. The president of SeaWorld at the time, Jan Schultz, told the LA Times that SeaWorld had a series of accidents that are more serious than we've had in a short period of time. John Sillick sued SeaWorld, and it was once again settled outside of court, and a gag order was instated. On September 23rd, 1988, Kandu gave birth to her child, Orchid. Orky's other child, with K now, was born on November 26th, 1988, and that birth took place at SeaWorld's fourth location in San Antonio, Texas. She was named Kayla, but he was not around for that birth because he died 3 days after Orchid was born. His health had been declining over a period of 6 months. He simply sank to the bottom of his tank and died. He was around 26 years of age at the time of his death, and SeaWorld said he died of old age. And yeah, that is pretty much everything for this video. There will be a separate video for Corky's side of the story and her perspective on everything. Thank you so much for watching. Let's take a moment of silence for Corky, Orky, and all of the other wild caught orcas. And I will see you in my next one.